Okay, let's talk about one of the more frustrating things of drawing, and that is noses. Um, Part of the reason is that it's parts of the nose can be really super distinct, and some of them are a little more subtle, and we have to be really watchful for the little subtle parts because of course we can see the nostrils. We know when we draw them we can draw our little ovals and we have shadowy places underneath and all. But what the part you have to be careful of is this part here. You can see with the highlight on her nose that right up here is kind of the tip of her nose. It's not necessarily down here. Here's where the light's hitting, so there's a bit of her nose up here. I want you to think about when you draw the nose, we just thinking about overall shapes. We have a curve under here, and it comes up, and then it kind of there'll be a curve at the top. This is kind of a whole bump. This you can kind of see the shadow here and the shadow here, and if it keeps going around, you can kind of see that it does help make this shape that ends up being a little bit of a curve at the top. Okay, so as you draw, you have to just be really careful about where that center is and have kind of a curve on each side to show that shape. Okay, but try to remember this kind of a shape here. It comes up from the curve from the nostril and up and then back down again. Okay, if we look at another one here, when we draw her nose, if all we drew was the nostril and then the curve and the curve and then this little place in the middle, we would be ignoring this whole feature here. And the maddening part about this is that it's the part that comes out toward us. And because it comes toward us, our brain just fritzes out like, how do I draw that? And we draw it by shadowing in everything around it. Okay, so we draw things darker around it and keep that light so that it looks like it's coming out. But again, we have a curve of the nostril, We have to see that there's kind of this is where the tip of the nose is. Now her highlight is a little bit lower, but you still have to imagine that this is almost like I'll say a triangle for lack of a better word, but here's the bottom and then it comes up and then comes down again. We have to treat it as that whole shape as it comes around. This model I use as an example because she has such extremely noticeable nostrils, and you rarely see that in some of these models. Very often they tip their heads down so you can't see them anyway. But here's the tip of her nose, and you can see it is very light. And here's the bottom, and then it curves around and then comes up and then down again. Okay, so we have to, with little gentle shading, show where that part is. That's a very real part of the nose, and we have to make sure that is shown through extra light values. Okay, here's another one. When her head is turned, it's not as obvious, but the end of her nose, this tip, this round part is right here. It's right here. And so we have to make sure that entire shape is given consideration. So we have to make sure that entire shape is in there, and we make sure that it shows up by just light shading around the edges. If we ignore that, the nose won't have its rightful shape and it won't look like it's coming out toward us. And between noses and ears, those are the two most maddening features that we could probably think about to draw. Okay, here's another one with this guy. When we look closely, we can see the very lightest place on the nose is up here. So we have to make sure that shape is included in the shading for the nose. It's almost like this is if like this was a pyramid, this is the bottom of the pyramid. So this is a whole flat plane to itself. We have to make sure that you give weight to this tip of the nose to really make sure that it identifies the whole picture, the whole shape of the nose. Sometimes the nose, you can't see a lot of it. This bottom shape, with his head, the nostrils and the bottom part are very flattened because of the angle. But he still has this tip of his nose, and it's a little brighter there, but it's darker around the edges. And when you keep that very light part in the very middle, that really makes the 3D part so it looks like it's coming out at us. Babies are their own challenge because I call these button noses because really there is virtually no bridge on their nose, and this is all super soft shading, and you can see if you squint at this, the only thing you can see is down here. there's really just very soft shading in here. There's no bridge on the nose. But we do have to make sure that that tip of the nose, that's the part that's closest to us. You can see it's a little darker here, and it's a little darker here. And we have to make sure we give weight to that tip of the nose. Or else the nose just is very diminished. Now we don't want to draw a lot of attention to the nose, but we want to make sure that it's shown as a 3D object. Okay, this guy's another one. Very clearly see that we have this triangle shape. That's a larger triangle shape, but within that we have this smaller shape. It's a line across and a curve, and you can almost see a definite place, a definite line right along here where the shadow breaks. And that's where the tip of the nose is. So we show that by shading, and actually there's a little bit of a lightness right there, so it's shading around there, and that gives a little bit more, I'll say gives it weight, but actually gives it lightness to the very middle. So be very aware of that very middle part of the nose as you're drawing. That's the part that's closest to us, and it needs to show up the most. Okay, last one here. Same with this guy. Now look at the difference here. You can only see, instead of nostrils, you just kind of see like a little shadowy place. But there's the tip of her nose. It's very super light. And then this is the bottom, like plane, the bottom facet of her nose down here, and shading down here, shading around. And there's that shine in the very middle that shows us that it's coming toward us, and it gives it depth. So make sure in the nose we pay attention to that very lightest spot and give it weight, give it lightness, and it gives it dimension in the very end, so that you have one of the most frustrating features to draw. Actually, they can all be really frustrating, because trying to get eyes perfect is frustrating too. But the thing about the nose is that the left side of our brain will fritz out saying, how do we draw something that's coming toward us? And we do that by playing with the values, lights and mediums and darks. Okay? Good luck with it.